So, episode 3 of the Manchester SEO podcast, and very pleased to be joined by marvellous Clare Ferguson, who's founder of With Agency. Welcome.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to talk all about social media today.
That's right.
Yeah. So, we should start by telling us a bit about you, how you got into what you do, and yeah.
Okay, how long have you got? So I've had quite a varied background. I haven't always worked in social media. So in a really small nutshell, I've got a scientific background. My first degree was in chemistry, and that's relevant because of the data aspect of it. But when I came out of uni, I had no interest in working in science, so I ended up working in sales and in recruitment. And that's where my journey with kind of lead generation and marketing began, because I worked for quite a small recruiter, and when you work in a small business, everybody does a bit of everything. And I found that I was drawn to the marketing side of it. And, you know, over time, social media became more important in that business and in subsequent businesses that I worked for. And I just kind of really loved it, fell into kind of writing copy, outreach, lead generation. And eventually I hit upon digital advertising, which kind of marries, you know, all of the data stuff that I like and the creative part that goes with social media. So I kind of found my niche in digital ads.
It's amazing when you talk to business owners how their life working up to what they do now helps them so much. I started in recruitment, and I found that everything to do with how to talk to people, how to sell, how to structure your day, as simple as that, really helps with running a business.
Absolutely, and I think working in recruitment, you know, you've got to be really resilient. You know, you come across setbacks. I mean, I'm sure you do in other careers, but you know, you've got to keep going and you've got to keep that motivation up. And I think when you come to run your own business and you start off, and you know, it's a startup and you're on your own with it, you know, you can really draw on that. And I think I've taken something, you know, I've taken the best bits out of every role I've worked in, and it kind of like molded, you know, me into what I am today. So you know, there were things that I liked about it and things that I didn't, but I think, you know, you always learn things from everything.
Yeah. And are you involved more on the paid ad side of things, or the organic, or both? Or?
I mean, they go hand in hand. So my main business is in digital advertising, so in paid search and paid social media. But if you work in that sector, you can't ignore the organic side. So I have clients come to me, and you know, one of the first things we look at is what they're already doing. So if they come to me to run ads, you know, the social media needs to be tip top as well. Otherwise, you're not maximising the potential of your efforts. You know, so I don't go looking for organic social media work, but invariably it finds me, and I am a qualified social media manager. So
well, we first met when I booked on a social media ads course, and you were doing the course. And you know, I was really impressed with like the content of the course and how it was delivered, and kind of kept contact, and I thought, well, let's have a chat with someone who obviously knows what she's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I really like training people, because when you train people, they can come at you with any kind of question. You know, people come to be trained, but they're working in all kinds of different businesses, industries. Obviously, with your SEO background, you've got a lot of the knowledge, but it's about how you apply that to advertising. So it's a nice challenge for me, and every time I train someone, I think I learn something else myself. So,
well, I love that, the fact that we can work with any industry, and with you know, invariably with people with very different roles within businesses as well, and the variety of that's quite good.
Yeah, I always say to people, social media is for everyone, every business, and you know, I don't have a particular niche or, you know, type of business that I work with, because I really like the variety. I like, you know, someone approaches me and says, look, I've got this product-based business and I want to do X, Y, and Z with it, and then, you know, the next person I come across is a service business or an entrepreneur, like a personal brand. And I just think if you've got the knowledge around social media, it's really interesting to be able to create a strategy for all those different types of people. I like that.
This is the third podcast. The first one we spoke about, we had a copywriter expert in, and then the second one we had sales training. And within that, they talk about how their field has changed through the years and developed, and social media was a big part of that, especially in the last kind of decade or so. Within social media itself, we seem to have a new platform every few years, and it must be tricky to keep up with that and become an expert in that one as well, because they're all slightly different.
Yeah, I think it really keeps you on your toes. I do a lot of one-to-one consultations with people on Zoom, and you jump on a call and the person shares their screen, and it might look, say they're in Facebook, in Business Manager, something along those lines, and their version of it is different to mine. And as a sort of expert, you end up thinking like, I look a bit silly here because the platforms are just changing so much, and someone has got a newer version or an older version, and you have to keep on your toes with that. But I think if you're going to advise people in that way, it's really important to keep on top of it. So I'm part of memberships, sort of masterminds and things like that. Say, for example, in Google Ads, part of Katie Griffin's mastermind, and I'm constantly learning and trying to keep up to date with that. And then if I take on a new client in a newish area, I might have to refresh myself about those specific parts of the platform. But yeah, it's a challenge. But again, it keeps us busy, doesn't it?
It does. When I'm talking with clients, I had a few months where most of the conversations was me trying to talk them out of having a TikTok account.
Yeah.
Because the first thing you say is, well, we've got to have TikTok. And obviously, one of the issues for me was I didn't think it'd relate to their business, but also we don't do anything to do with TikTok. So I was like, okay, we need to get you back on focused on what we were talking about. Do you have similar conversations over it? People have preconceived ideas of what they want?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much noise around social media, and people have heard lots of things. They've seen influencers, they've seen this is the next big thing. And a lot of what I do is managing people's expectations and a bit of education really about what is achievable, because people come to you with a particular budget, or, sometimes they have ideas in mind, and sometimes they're great ideas. And other times I just think, as you say, I can't see your brand in that place. And also it's about whether they've got time and resources to be able to dedicate to that platform. So TikTok's a really good example. So if you are not a native on TikTok, and if you haven't got any content, or you haven't got a strategy, or it's going to be quite a big ask for you to start that afresh. There's no reason why you can't do it, but the question is your time and effort best used there, or would you perhaps be better sticking to a platform where your customers are, and they're there, and how to deal with that platform? So I always say to people, think about the time you've got, the resources you've got, and it's better to do, say, 2 platforms well than try and split yourself across everything and do a bad job with it.
No, it's true. I mean, we often get asked, how long will it take? And there's no right answer to it, because it depends on so much competition and budgets and how much work we can do. But like you say, if you're starting with a brand new account, it's going to take a lot longer than one that's been going. There's been some content going on for a while. Yeah. It's the same with SEO and websites. If you've had something up for 6 months, 12 months, it's going to react a bit quicker than one that has just been created a new domain and everything.
Yeah, and sometimes it's about whether the metrics that the clients are interested in focusing on are the right ones. Like, still have a lot of people come and go, and I want to hit 10,000 followers, and I always try to steer people away from this. And why is that relevant to you? What you really need is people who are engaged with your brand, who are interacting with you, who are coming closer to buying from you, who will remember you. Followers are, it's a vanity metric, isn't it? But still in people's minds, it's the magic 10k followers or whatever it is they've got in their head. So a lot of it's about thinking like, what's the outcome you're looking for from social media, and what's the best, strategy to get you there. And strategy is the big thing for most people I work with.
It's interesting you say that, because we've had similar conversations where we've looked at someone's stats on their site, and they're getting a lot of traffic, but they're not getting any inquiries or sales or anything. And then you look at what they're ranking for and what they're targeting, it's nothing to do with what they do, or it's not really related. And then you focus that, they get less traffic, but they get more.
Well, this is the point. I have a lot of people come to me that have previously advertised or, had their social media managed by larger agencies. And, there's some great agencies out there, but there are lots of agencies that are measuring, in my opinion, the wrong things. Right. So they'll tell them that, they'll tell the customer that they're getting a certain amount of growth or this or that. And what they're talking about is views or, reach or, those, click-through rate or whatever. And I'm saying to people, well, but what is your goal? If your goal is sales, you can have as many hits on your website as you like, but if no one's buying from you, or they're bouncing right off, or, it's not relevant to them, then what's the point in that? That isn't a win. You're looking for sales, you're looking for income, you're looking for money in the bank. So it's
a waste of money, isn't it? You might have all the reach, but if no one's actually buying from you or anything like that, then it's a waste of money.
We could all drive traffic if we put money behind advertising, but it doesn't mean it's the right sort of traffic or people with the right intent to purchase or move along your funnel or whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So it's about getting social media to work in a way that, benefits your business. Yeah. Sounds quite obvious, doesn't it? But you'd be surprised what's going on out there.
Yeah, and there's so much noise, isn't there, in the world, and especially online, that it's difficult. If you're a scientist, if that's your specialism, you're not gonna. It's almost a little bit of knowledge is quite dangerous, especially with SEO. And so it's often half the job is to talk them through what we're actually going to
do. And that's why it's important for businesses out there to make sure that they check the person that they're working with, and get look at the reviews and get feedback, and make sure that the strategy that's being developed makes sense for their business, and again go back to the outcomes and think, is this person actually delivering for me what I need? So.
With your clients, so we've worked with a musician as an individual, but mainly their businesses. With social media, do you get more of a mix of what people are looking for, and I suppose you get more individuals looking to spread their...
Yeah, you get quite a lot of coaches and kind of personal branded type businesses who are looking to raise their profile, and but I mean I just work on a huge variety of things, so like product-based businesses, e-com, I do a lot of Facebook and Instagram advertising, so obviously those things lend themselves quite well to that. But my background is in B2B, so I've always got like half an eye on the service-based people with the lead gen, because I just see opportunities to help people get to where they want to be, and I think businesses sometimes they don't have the skills in-house to do the social media properly, so they're really kind of looking outwards to experts like us to help them out to achieve their business goals. But it's I really like working with individuals because they're so invested in their own journey, and as a partner with them, it's really exciting when things work. So I get kind of a buzz out of that.
Instant feedback, isn't it?
Good and bad,
would this, do you find the style of content changes for those kind of different businesses and different styles of?
It's all about. It's but it's important though, because it's all about getting the messaging right. Because you're looking to create content that resonates with the target audience of that particular brand, and it isn't always easy to achieve that, and it's about pitching it in a way that either the person can't do without it, they've got some like level of FOMO and they're just going to go out and buy it right now, or it solves a problem for them, or they can imagine themselves wearing that item or whatever. So there's lots to it. Lots of user generated content becomes important, and so that would be really different for a product versus a service-based type of business. But like I said, I quite like the challenge of approaching each one of those businesses individually. And just because you've got a product in that industry doesn't mean you're just going to copy your competitor, because all brands are different. So even if they're selling something similar, it's like, what can you bring to that? What's your like kind of your USP, or how are you going to grab people? So it's a nice, interesting one, trying to differentiate those brands.
Martin Williams, the copywriter that was on the first episode, he's big on message first, and essentially what you're saying. It's funny how different areas of marketing kind of all lead to the same process.
And I think as well on the technical side of things, with the ability to track users across platforms being reduced, the messaging becomes even more critical. Because if the tracking's less accurate, we obviously are in a different age now. Google's just about to remove its third-party cookies and all of that. So I think the messaging is often the thing that is grabbing people, because the ability to target and track is not what it was in years gone by. So messaging first, definitely.
When it comes to tracking, we in the SEO world, there's been changes to Google Analytics and things like that, and we're getting very different readings for them and for Google Search Console, and then the SEO tools are all giving different figures now, which is really difficult to explain to clients.
Yes, tell me about it.
And to work out yourself, what's going on and make some sense over the data. Do you have anything like that with the social media platforms at all? Do you find it fairly?
Yeah, I mean, definitely with ads. I mean, because we use all those same ways of tracking that you do, and like Google Analytics GA4 is a different beast. But yeah, we encourage our clients to just look at the bigger picture views of it, and kind of back in the day there was an effort to get really granular on tracking, and you wanted to tie it down as much as possible, and that just doesn't really work in the same way now. So we're looking at obviously growth across all platforms, and we're looking at aggregated spend and aggregated results, and obviously we look at the data and we can see trends and what have you, and we're going to scale where we see best value, but we're looking at clients to get clients to see the bigger picture as much as possible. Not always easy.
No. We have a chat internally with George, the cameraman, and he did a test with cameras and technology.
Yeah.
And found it was a really interesting test actually, where he found that certain makes of cameras, the images and the video seem to get more.
With the algorithm.
Yeah, you will go more on the social media platforms than others.
Yeah.
Have you found this? Is this something you picked up, or?
So this goes back to kind of getting the best kind of copy and then creative that you can. So I'll give you an example of where I found that. So back end of last year, I was working with a large multinational brand. And they had an influencer working on their account who's a very well-known person.
Okay.
And they provided fantastic images, as you might imagine. So really professionally shot. Obviously, this influencer was featured, and those ads just absolutely flew. So they went up onto the platform. We had a great strategy. We created a good campaign. Happy with all the copy, but it made such a difference to have that. So that has to be down with A, the person that's in them, but also B, the quality of the imagery, the way it's shot. I don't know about different types of cameras, but for me as a social media manager, it made a massive difference what was provided.
I mean, one of the theories you came up with was perhaps there's more metadata behind the image, and or perhaps it's actually more clear. There's more clarity, so it comes out better, and it's more eye catching. And then that triggers the people to engage, and then you trigger the algorithm through that.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating part of.
There has to be something behind the scenes where those images are in some way better optimized or more better received, I guess, by the platforms. And that's why we always test everything, because we put stuff up. You put something up, you think it's like, that one's going to fly, that's I love that one. But that's your personal view, So it's really important we push everybody to test things against each other, so that we make sure we're spending the money on the stuff that's actually working. And again, with smaller businesses, we encourage people to get the best quality images that they can possibly, to invest in their social media more so than trying to cut corners.
So it brings us on to artificial intelligence and AI and things like artificially creating content as opposed to actually creating something that's I was going to say real, but who knows the terms these days. We become more of a dinosaur with every breath, but it's quite an interesting subject, I think, because something that we talked about with the previous podcast, creating content, whether it's text or images, or have you found any, what's your view on AI and social media and using it?
I think it's something that we've got to embrace and utilize as part of our planning. So if I think about creating a Facebook ads campaign, when I first started out, you were allowed a certain number of creatives and whatever. Now I'm typing the first line and Facebook's like, hey, I've got 5 more here for you, what about this? And part of me thinks you've got to go with those and test some of them out. I mean, obviously you've got to, like everything with AI, you've got to sense check it and make sure it's appropriate for the brand. But I think all of the tools that the platforms give us to run advertising, they tend to give you stuff that they favour. So I think if they're giving you ideas and options, you at least need to investigate whether they work. So I normally, have a mixture. I have some that the brand has created, and I allow Facebook to kind of have a couple of theirs, and then we just have a look what works.
I mean, it can be really useful. We were doing a blog about painting plasterboard. It was a copywriter thanked me for that job, and he trying to find an image of someone painting plaster. It's really difficult, but we created it using AI, and it was very useful with that. I think obviously that it's how you use the tool, isn't it? It can be really helpful.
You couldn't find any pictures of watching paint dry. I mean that's absolutely it. Like if it doesn't exist already, why not create it? It's a reasonably easy thing to put together. So I just think those tools are there for us. It's kind of our responsibility to investigate them and find out how they work, and be again, showing clients what can be achieved by that, because AI is not going away, and so by embracing it and learning more about it, we're going to be able to use it to our advantage.
Yeah. One of the I was thinking about talking about censorship on social media a little bit, because it was in the news quite a bit over the last few years, with obviously Elon taking over Twitter, and we did some social media and SEO for a podcaster, and she was talking to ex-military guys, ex-special forces, really, really good interviews. But we struggled to advertise them online because it was seen as potentially harmful topics. And it was just a guy talking about his career and his experiences, and not going into too many details. And it seemed very prohibitive, especially when obviously the Ukraine situation was going on with Russia. So Do you have any thoughts on that? Any example?
Yeah, so I think it's really difficult for the platforms because they can't kind of do right for doing wrong. So if they get it wrong and things are shown that shouldn't be, they get jumped on, rightly. And then they try to censor it and it doesn't quite go right, and then they get criticised for that as well. So, it's clearly a difficult situation, but sometimes it's so frustrating when trying to manage things for clients. For example, I worked with a mental health app, which is doing really well, and they're obviously putting something out there for good. It's trying to help people who are having issues with their own mental health, but obviously the content that's related to that would appeal to people that are struggling with mental health problems is quite challenging. So no matter how you try to kind of package that up, the content will always be of a sensitive nature. But the question is, how do you promote that and get it to the people that need to see it without it being censored? And it's a real challenge because certain words will just flag things, ads will be banned, it's moderated by bots, and it's just literally red flags. So it's about just doing the best you can by staying inside the policies and testing, and a little bit of hoping for the best, I have to say.
Yeah, sometimes it was tricky to really understand what would go through and what wouldn't. Even reading the guidelines. Oh,
I know. The guidelines are quite woolly, and I think you look at it, and because obviously a lot about the brand or the piece of content, you think, well, I know this is good, and I know that it's a really great message, and I know people need to hear about it, and it's going to be really helpful. And then it just comes back like straight banned, and you're just like, no, this, but it's very frustrating, particularly if you're a charity and you're trying to help people. So I don't have a way around it. So we're just literally like, appealing and like everybody else. But I feel like, Facebook or other platforms have like special categories for things, and obviously you have to follow along with those as much as possible. And after that, it's just, again, back to testing and hit a bit of hoping.
Yeah. So what are the main kind of challenges, for in your line of work then when it comes to social media?
Well,
you probably put censorship into that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it totally depends which industry, you're working in. So lots of the challenges are around making things profitable, or, things like getting funnels right. Censorship obviously is a problem in certain areas, but also the logistics of kind of managing the platforms and the back end of it, and getting support from the platforms, like as a social media advertiser. When things go wrong, it's about how to access that support, because it's not always forthcoming, unfortunately. And when you've got customers spending quite large amounts of money, and then there's issues and you can't easily resolve them, like for me, that's a really big challenge because it affects my credibility, but it's quite difficult for me to do anything about it. So that's something, I've had customers with that have had their accounts permanently banned for no particular reason that any of us can see. And the platform's decision is final. So I find that really challenging when I can't provide a reasonable explanation for things.
Yeah, it's really frustrating when you're trying to provide a professional service, and then it's out of your hands as to what's
it's literally a computer says no moment, and it's like the client's like, well, we haven't done anything. I'm like, I know that because I've managed your stuff and I've been really careful. But at times platforms go through phases where they're going to crack down on certain things. One time with Facebook, it was people who had old accounts that were not set up correctly or whatever it was. And these people were linked into business managers, and they just kind of went round and said, oh, sorry, all of those are not going to work. It was a few years ago. And it's just really difficult if you've set yourself up as an advertiser, and and you've done all the training and kept on top of everything, to have something that you can't resolve. I think it's really difficult.
It disrupts the strategy and the growth and everything that you've put all your heart and time into.
Yeah, I think, I'm a real problem solver, and, I just go and go and go until I find a solution, and then sometimes you hit upon something where there isn't really a solution or not a good one. Yeah. So it's I find that tricky.
So in the future, what do you see? Where do you see social media going in the future? And the challenges involved in that.
Well, it's here to stay for sure. I think we're just going to get, the platforms are going to continue to evolve as they have done. Who could have predicted TikTok? It just rose like so quickly, and so it's about how people are consuming content that will drive what happens with social media platforms, in my opinion. Yeah. But I think at some point there'll probably be some sort of kickback where people are like, too much. Our brains are just cannot cope with it, and there'll be some kind of evolution of that, because it's just getting like more and more and more, and more immediacy, more urgency. Like things are shorter and faster, and I think lots of people's brains are getting to the point where they're just jumping about all over the place. So I think there'll need to be some kind of reset at some point, but what form that will take, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I don't know whether you find this, but as a business, we didn't do any social media for about 6 months because we were doing it for clients, and I was sick of it.
Yeah. I always joke to people when they say, "Oh, can I have a look at your social media?" I always say, "Don't ever look at a social media because it was like when I worked in recruitment. I spent all day on the phones, from 9 till 6, like talking to people. And when I got home, I didn't want to ring any of my friends or my parents or whatever because I just didn't want to talk anymore. Just like forgotten how to speak. And it's a bit like that with your own social media, because when you work in a creative business and you're coming up with ideas all the time, sometimes you can't think of them for yourself because you just kind of, all thought out really. So
a good friend of mine, he says that he's not on LinkedIn. He says if you're on LinkedIn all the time, you're not busy enough.
Yeah, there is a bit of that.
I mean, I'm not sure that's always the case, but you've got to be really disciplined as well, haven't you? It's hard if it's your shop window in effect as well, isn't it?
I think if you're a small business, you've only got a certain amount of hours in the day, haven't you? And if you're booked out with client work, perhaps that's the time to get some help in to run your own socials. I think it's about delegating the tasks and outsourcing things that others can do. So whether that's outsourcing your bookkeeping so you can do your social media, or I work with a lot of small businesses and we all have the same challenges. So I think it's I perhaps sometimes need to practice what I preach a bit more and get someone else in, because there's loads of talented social media managers out there. So I don't have to run my own socials, but I can oversee them and for somebody else to do them.
So, I mean, part of the reason for starting this podcast is because I'd spoken to so many people over the last few years that have started their own business, they've grown it in different ways. And there's some really interesting stories that helped me grow mine. Yeah. And so when you're talking to the small businesses, what's the main, the advice you give them when you're starting out with them? I think it's know your strengths, know what you're good at. Make sure you get yourself set off on a solid foundation. Like one of the first things I did before I even had a business or any clients is I employed an accountant. And I did that because when I was starting off in business, the thing that concerned me about the business was the financial side of it. Now, I don't have a problem with financial stuff. Like I said before, I'm a kind of science data-y person. But I just knew that in the back of my head, I would worry about that. And by employing somebody, even though I didn't really need an accountant at that point, by having somebody there on hand, I just felt better about it. So I was able to forget about that. And she'd say, no, you've done everything you need to do now. And I could then get on with my business. So whilst it might seem like a big investment when you're starting off to have certain things done for you by others, sometimes it's really the best use of your resources because it enables you to concentrate on the things that you do best. And, that sometimes I come in and do people's social media. Could they do it themselves? Yeah, of course they could. But will it take them all day? Probably.
So it's about understanding how much time you've got, how much energy you've got, and where it's best spent.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that organisation of time and being able to, like you say, create something and then use that and put it out there in the most time efficient way possible is.
Yeah. Because if you employ, say, a social media manager to create some content, or a video editor to create a video for you, you can use that in so many different ways, and that person can give you a strategy about how you can make that piece of content work for you 5 times over. Whereas if you don't have the knowledge in social media because your area of expertise is something else, you're going to spend ages making it, and then you're only going to use it once, and then you're like, oh, I've got to do it again now. Whereas just tapping in, like I sometimes have people book power hours with me, and all it helps them to do is, like, they kind of know what they're doing. They just need to elevate it a little bit. They just need, like, the next bit of the thinking that perhaps, you know, is not part of their skill set. And once you kind of set people on their way again, you know, they're like, oh, right, okay, and off they go, you know. So it's kind of enabling people in lots of respects.
Fascinating. So if any one that's listening to the podcast would like to contact you, how would they find?
Okay, so you can find me. I have a website, it's withagency.co.uk. You'll find me on LinkedIn as myself, Clare Ferguson, and Instagram is the other main one, so it's @with.agency. So I'm always about online, either for myself or for other businesses. So if you send me a message, I'll see it. And I love talking to people, as you might have gathered. Yeah. So I'm really interested in talking about social media and growth of businesses, because I've worked with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, and I really like seeing people doing well. So happy to answer questions, or if I can help anyone, you know, by all means get in touch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast and talking to us. Very grateful for that. We've been you might see that we have some brownies on the table and water and everything like that. Been kindly given some brownies by Bele Brownie, and they do all sorts of cakes and brownies for businesses, and they've got shops all around Stockport. And we've also got Crag spring water, and we've been supplied cans of still and sparkling water from, and you can find them on Instagram, the bearded water sommelier, and Crag spring water, and we're very thankful for that. So thanks for listening, and hopefully see you next time.